A 6-year-old taught me something about Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing games that I didn't know. Well, I didn't realize. I was running this game for this family once, parents and the 2 kids and the youngest 6-year-old. This kid rolled amazing for his elven archer. Great stats across the board. He had the best rolls of anybody at the table. Now on paper, he was a total 100% badass. As the campaign got going, the party needed to go into this ancient crypt. I had it carved into the hillside, forgotten and dangerous, and I described the way I described most things. The entrance was cut into the rock face like a wound that never healed. The stone worn smooth by centuries. It was slick with moss that drank what little light touched it. And the air, it felt wrong, too still, too patient. The kind of waiting that turns anticipation into dread. And beyond that threshold, darkness that felt aware. That noticed when you noticed it. Cold leaked from the opening like blood seeping from a bandage. The smell hid in waves, decay. Earth turned sour. Something old and rotting underneath. And if you looked at it too long, you started to see shapes in the black. Not shapes that moved, shapes that had always been there. The crypt wasn't just a hole in the ground, it was a throat. It was ravenous. By the numbers, the kid's characters was the obvious choice to go first, His eyes, he had the best stats, and his eyes worked in low light. And all the adults at the table were like, yeah, your archer should lead. You go first. And the kid looked at me, and then you could see the gears running and as he imagined that doorway. And he said, I'm not going in there. He wasn't whining. He was just stating a fact. I wouldn't go in there. That kid wasn't looking at his character sheet, and he wasn't thinking about stats or hooks or whatever he was supposed to do, or that he would probably be the best scout. He was there, standing in front of that crypt. He could smell it. He could feel that hungry darkness. His reality was simple. He would not walk into that place. And it didn't matter what the numbers said. And it didn't matter what the party needed. He was living in the moment. That 6-year-old was co-authoring the story. Naturally, without trying. He was doing something most of us have forgotten. So today we're going to talk about how to do just that. Not through acting or knowing more rules, through asking different questions. The kind that a 6-year-old asks without even realizing it. The Buddhists talk about this as being present, not in your head analyzing, just experience what's in front of you. And kids, well, they can do this naturally, and they don't need to think, should I be scared? No, they're just scared, or curious, excited, whatever they feel, they are. He was just standing at that threshold, feeling what he felt and responding from that. That's the child's mind. No separation between you and the moment. You're not watching yourself play, you're just playing. Most of us has lost that somewhere. We learn to think about what we're doing while we're doing it, analyzing, calculating, directing ourselves. That gap between feeling and responding, well, that's what kills co-authorship. And that 6-year-old, he didn't have that gap. But that 6-year-old, he had a problem. Well, it wasn't a problem for him. He was 6. But a problem if you're trying to do what he did. He was playing himself. That fear he felt at the crypt, that was real fear. And it wasn't the elf's fear, the kid's fear. The elven archer on that character sheet was just a costume. Underneath, he was still that 6-year-old. He could have been playing a dwarf, a half-orc, a wizard. None of it would have mattered because it would have been the same answer every single time. I'm not going in there. Not because elves feared darkness or some quirky, weird backstory reason. Because the kid sitting at that table, he wouldn't walk into that place. That's what pure presence looks like. When you're just being yourself, immediate, honest response from who you actually are. The character sheet is just flavor. And there's no complexity in that. The kid wasn't exploring anyone different from himself. He's making choices he would make. And he wasn't thinking through someone else's eyes. It was just him responding honestly and truthfully in the moment. But we want to play something different, a 500-year-old elf, a wizard that shoots fire from our fingertips, with our own way of seeing things, their own reasons for doing things. That takes complexity the kid just didn't have. So the real goal is both. And we need to have them both at the same time. We need that presence, that immediate honest response, but we also want to see it as someone else. The balancing act between being fully in the moment and being someone who isn't you. And this brings us all the way back to co-authorship, where two people are writing together, or more if you have a party. But as a co-author, this is about you and the game master, because the game master builds the world and you build a life in that world. The story happens what I like to call the feedback loop, which just gets expanded when you have more people at the table. But the story is really about you and the game master. And for other players, it's about them and the game master, and so on and so on and so on. Think of it like a choose your own adventure book. But instead of picking, I'm going to do A or B or C, there's just a blank line. And you get to write whatever you want. The game master reads what you wrote and then writes the next part based on that. And then you write again and backwards and forth. You're not following a path, you're writing it together. A lot of advice says, follow the hook. See those hooks. The stranger in the corner. Well, I need to go talk to them. There's a quest on the board. I'm going to take that. And yeah, it works. It gets the game moving. It keeps things simple. But you need to ask yourself, are you furthering the story or are you just chasing some shiny object?
Squirrel!
When you take every hook because it's there and presented, you're reacting to what's presented. When you respond from your own character's actual life, you're writing your part of that story. One keeps the game going, the other makes it yours. But to fill in that blank, you need both things we've been talking about. You need presence, that immediate, honest response, just like that 6-year-old. And you also need that complexity, the tools that make your response belong to the character who you're playing, who isn't you. And that's what the last 7 videos we've been building. Your hunger, your lines, your engine, the surrender to the world and your body, your backstory, and even your evolution, all of it. Those are the kindling of the fire. And when the game master presents something and you need to fill in that blank that he provided for you, that's what we use. So how do you actually build that? How do you create a character with enough life to feed the loop? That 6-year-old didn't need tools because he was just himself. There was no construction required. His fear, his choices were all him. But you want to be someone else, someone who might walk into that crypt even though you personally wouldn't. Someone who thinks differently, acts differently, makes choices you would never, ever make. And that takes actual building. And it's not with your backstory. Well, not just your backstory, and definitely not some 10-page volume on your village and where you came from. Building means giving your character the pieces that make them real-ish. Relish? Real-ish. When you need to respond in the moment, when there's that blank line and you have to write something, what do you use? You rely on your character's hunger. Your hunger is why you sat down at the table. Their hunger, your character's hunger, is why they get up in the morning. That shapes every response they make. You have to surrender to the world. You have to surrender to that world that you're in and the consequences it provides. There are hard lines and soft lines. What they absolutely won't cross versus what they'll accept, even if they hate it. Those boundaries create friction. The mortality audit, the reality of physics pressing on their body, the biological limits, their price tag on the world's economy. What it costs to keep that body moving. Their operating system, their alignment as software running their decisions, their filters, how they see the world, their voice, how do they process everything happening around them, their engine, the psychological mechanisms driving them, and the fuel, the friction from their alignment that powers it all, their evolution, and the pressure that shaped them, and how the methodology they use has changed over time, and what that road and the potholes did to them. All of this together, that's your kindling. And when the game master presents the world and you need to fill in that blank, this is what you pull from. If you want a full breakdown of how to build each piece, the previous 7 videos walk through step by step. But whether you use my system or build your own, you need these pieces, because without them, you're just a 6-year-old wearing a costume. With them, you're someone else and living in that world. And when you show up as someone else, really actually someone different, that's when that feedback loop starts working. All right, you've got the tools. You understand what that feedback loop is. But what the hell do you actually write in the blank space the GM gave you? The game master describes a town. Crops are failing in the field. That's just a detail. What do you do with it? And most players look for the hook. Is this a quest? Should I investigate? Oh no, Scooby-Doo. The game presented something, so I take it and move forward. I want you to try this instead, or at least see it. Before you respond, you want to check your character's life. Not what should I do? Just look at who they are and see what comes up. If you're playing someone who's running from their past, the failing crops, that's not your problem. You're not staying long enough for it to matter. So you just keep moving. That's your response. Here's a different character. This one spent their whole life, their whole childhood watching their family farm die. The second they hear crops failing, something tightens in their chest. They don't think about it. They just walk out in the fields and look at the soil. That's their response. Okay, let's do one more. Maybe this one's calculating. Always thinking 3 steps ahead. Failing crops means food shortages. That means unrest. That means opportunity. They start asking around, who controls the food supply in this town? That's your response. It's the same detail. 3 different responses. And sure, there are probably hundreds of responses we could come up with. And not one of these are following a hook. All from checking who your character is and letting that tell you how to write that response. That's it. That is the technique. The game master presents something. Before you respond, check your character's life, then write from there. The story engages from that collision. The real world meets real character. Neither of you plan where it goes. You're just writing it together. Co-authorship also has a shadow side, and we need to talk about it. Sometimes we think we're co-authoring when we're actually playing above the world instead of in it. And it's a big difference.
So what you got? Okay, so my dad is a ribbit. Oh, so a little frog person. But my mom is a giant. How does that happen? You don't want to know. Okay, so you're part frog and part giant. So what does that make you then? Frogzilla. Okay.
That's not living in the world. That's imposing something on top of it for entertainment value. Alone in the Dork, where this clip came from, he's hilarious, and you should go check him out. But this example is breaking the system for the joke. Co-authorship means your character matters to you, not as entertainment. As a person, you're building within this actual real place. The dragon in front of you, ancient, powerful, he could incinerate you with one breath. Oh, I seduced the dragon. Unless that's the table you're at, where seducing dragons is part of how things work, that breaks co-authorship. Would Legolas try to seduce Smaug? Would Bilbo? Even Pippin? Well, maybe Pippin. No, because they're real people in a real world with real stakes. That response comes from wanting the table to laugh, not from the character actually living in that world. Playing for the joke breaks it. And now I'm not saying don't be funny. Funny happens naturally when real characters hit absurd situations. But when you choose the joke over what the character would actually do, you're just performing for the table and you're not co-authoring with the game master. Your character has limitations and consequences, physics pressing on them. They can't do everything and they can't win every moment. Real people are limited. If your character isn't, they're not real. Work within what's possible, and you're building with the game master. They present a reality. You respond to it, and the story emerges. Demand the world bend around you, and you're breaking the game for entertainment. Next time at the table, make sure you watch your instinct. All of this comes down to one question. Not what should I do, what's the plot, or even what would be cool. Just what does my life say? That's it. That's the whole technique. Next session, before you respond to anything, ask yourself that one question. What does my character's life say about this? Not what do you think, not what makes sense strategically. What does your life say? Their hunger, their hard lines and soft lines, the morality audit, the physics, the biological limits, the price tag, their operating system, alignment, filter, voice, engine, and fuel, and even their evolution. This pressure and methodology. All of these pieces together, what do they tell you about this moment right now? Then respond from that. That's co-authorship. That's the mechanism. Here's what changes when you start asking that question. You stop being an audience and you become a writer of an epic story. The audience waits to be entertained, watches for the next hook, follows where the story leads. Co-authors, writers, they build. They respond from life and create story through that response. The shift happens the moment you ask, what does my life say? Instead of what's next. All right, here's your homework. Next session, take one thing from this video and own it. Just one. Ask, what does my life say? Before responding to something happening in your game. Check who your character is before taking or biting the hook. And then after the session, come back here and tell me about it. What did you try? How did it feel? What changed? Drop in the comments. I read every one and I want to know what you discover. This isn't about being perfect. It's about building skills one moment at a time. Take one thing, try it once, see where it goes. If this helped, hit like and subscribe to the Fluffy Spawn and the Warren below. We're building something different here. Not the game where you follow hooks and wait for the next scene. The one where you actually are alive in the world, co-authoring the story with your game master, making choices that cost something and matter because they're earned. That 6-year-old at the crypt, he showed us what present looks like. And now you know how to take that presence and make it belong to someone who isn't you. Be the 6-year-old, but make yourself complex. I'll see you in the next one.